Hit the lights!
You've discovered the Halfwatt podcast. We want to educate and entertain by tapping into the most trusted source of new technology, the ones installing and innovating it. You, the tradespeople that build from the ground up. Join us as we talk with industry leaders, veteran contractors, and even some young blood.
Welcome to the Halfwatt podcast. My name is Gage, co-host and co-producer of the show, and today I'll be talking about access control. I'll be going over some basic troubleshooting tactics and techniques, and maybe even get into some more complicated issues if we have time. This may end up becoming a part 1 and part 2, but we'll get there when we get there. First off, I'd like to thank everyone for listening. We've been getting a lot of great feedback, and we're growing every week, and we're very excited about where this show is taking us. And it's all because of you guys, so appreciate it. Keep spreading the word, and we'll keep putting out content and giving low volts a voice. The low voltage trade is expanding at a crazy rate right now, and there's a lot of awesome jobs and people that we want to talk to. So on that note, if you know anyone that you think should be on the show, shoot us a message on Instagram at Halfwattpod, or just email us at halfwattpod@gmail.com. All right, so moving on, I'm actually in the middle of building our own access control system so that I can do videos basically covering what we'll talk about today. And there's so much more information I could put into a step-by-step video that's just not worth having on an audio-only platform. With my ADHD, I'd probably just end up confusing people and definitely not paint a good picture. But onto the topic, I'm just going to explain a basic access control system for people who don't know. If you already know this stuff, stick with me. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. A typical access control system consists of some sort of a card or biometric reader that will only allow people with the approved credentials through the door. It'll have some sort of lock, whether it's a door strike, mag lock, transfer hinge and electrified handle, or a transfer hinge and electrified crash bar. It'll have a door contact, which is typically just a little plastic cylinder with a switch inside of it and a magnet in the door that closes the switch. So anytime the door is opened, once that magnet gets far enough out of reach, the switch will open up and tell the system that the door is open. So if there's not a valid card read on the door, the system will know someone broke in instead of badging. Last is the door contact's best friend, the REX, which stands for request to exit, which is just a sensor mounted above the door on the inside or secure side, because the space is being secured by the reader on the outside of the door. But that sensor picks up when people are leaving the space so that a door contact knows that someone is leaving rather than breaking in. The REX won't always be a motion detector above the door. A lot of the time, especially newer projects, the REX will actually be a sensor in the electrified door handle or crash bar. So when they are turned or pushed, it works the same way. Sensor says someone's leaving, so there isn't any alarms generated in the system. In some cases, there won't be a REX at all, like in the case for a read-in, read-out door. So it's the same setup except you'll have a reader on both sides. No REX. The reason you don't want a REX is because it's not an exit. You either have permission going in and out, or you're breaking in and out. Typically, the reason for these setups are both spaces are secured, and some people might only have access to one and not the other, but some, need to have both. Or if they want logs of people going in and out of spaces like birthing centers or laboratories, or just, stock rooms if they're, holding valuable company material. And that's pretty much it as far as door hardware goes. Last part of the basics that I kind of just want to go over is panels and wiring. Card readers are typically going to be a 22.6 or a 22.8, depending on what the client wants, what features they want. Depending on if the lock has the REX in it, it'll be an 18.4. If the REX is above the door, it'll just be an 18.2. The motion recs above the door will be like a 22.4 for power and data. And then typically the actual door contacts will only be 22.2, but there are some cases if they actually have the security system also on that door contact, it goes back to a Bosch system or something, then you'll have two 22.2s coming into the door contact, and it'll actually have two switches in it. So that's the double pull, double throw. Send it to two different systems on two different switches. Typically with access control panels, there'll be 2, 4, or 8 doors. I don't think I've ever seen any 6-door panels. But they'll have designated places for your readers, usually designated for the door contact and recs as well. Sometimes that is not the case. Some boards, I think like S2 or Software House, are all auxiliary, which means you get to choose what the input is. But typically you'll have auxiliary inputs and auxiliary outputs. Most systems, again, are going to have a designated actually output, normally open, common, normally closed, for you to land your wires on. If it doesn't have designated inputs and outputs, and you're there on a service call, just hope that the guy that installed it labeled, or else, you're not going to know what anything is unless you log into the system, or if your company is like my company and has actual standards for the colors of every wire and exactly what they mean, which makes it so much easier, knowing that if you walk into a panel, red, black is going to be a door contact, white, green is going to be a Rex 90% of the time, unless they have auxiliary inputs, like a door unlock or a panic button. But so that's pretty much the bare minimum basics of an access control system. Okay, basic troubleshooting processes and procedures. You got a call that a reader's not working. Don't just take the reader off the wall and replace it right off the bat unless the reader is just completely dead and hot. It's burnt out. The first thing that I would probably do, if it's on, then you obviously know it has power. So, badge it. Is it scanning? Or is nothing happening? Is the LED telling you that the door is unlocked? So if you're badging the reader and like nothing is happening except for you're getting a beep, then you're going to want to go back to the panel and see if the panel is getting that badge read. Do you have access, or do the people that called you have access? You might have to log in for that, or just get somebody who for a fact has access. And is that relay on the board switching states to send power to the door? If it is, then move on to whatever separate relay. Typically it'll be an iDeck, or you'll have a separate power supply that also has a relay on it and will send power out to the door. Put your meter on it. Are you getting 24 volts out to the field? If you are, perfect. It's not a reader problem anymore. You know that there's either a problem with the wiring, which is typically not the case. Usually at that point, it's either going to be a transfer hinge or something's wrong with the lock. But, if you genuinely think that it is the reader, it's scanning, but nothing's happening anywhere, what you can do is, if you have a test reader on you, some people do that. I have a test reader that I have multiple, plugins for certain access control panels and a test reader. So I'll put on whatever, plug I need, put it on, badge it, and you can see right there at the panel, if it's working. If you don't have that, another really easy thing to do is take the reader of the closest door to you, or to the door in question, and pull it off the panel and put it in the spot of the door that's having issues. So back out to the door, whatever reader you're now using for that door, you can go badge it. If it unlocks the door in question, then you're done. You got to replace that reader. If not, then you know it's not a reader problem. Also, there'll be times where the door's working when they send a command to it, or if the door's on a schedule, it's supposed to be unlocked from 7 o'clock to 5 p.m. It's working then, but as soon as it locks, it's not working. Right there, it's not the panel. The relay obviously knows and is working. It's switching states. Typically, that's a really easy way to identify right off the bat. It's the reader or the cable. Maybe there's a loose wire somewhere. All pretty easy things to check. You can just meter it out. In some cases, you'll get something pretty weird, like at wrong door, or which basically means access denied. When people in the system, you for sure know that they have access. They've always had access, but all of a sudden they're getting at wrong door. That is typically a sign that either the door controller isn't working or there's something wrong with the motherboard. If you're using something like, the basic ones, S2, Linnell, AMAG, one of those kinds, flatten the panel. Too many people will walk up to that, see that, and be like, okay, this board needs to get replaced. And boards are so expensive. I can't tell you how many people have told me that a board needed to get replaced, but then I go back to the motherboard, flatten it, or basically unplug everything, let it die down for a minute, plug everything back in. It'll send a new download to the panel, re-download everything, and then all of a sudden all those problems stop happening, and we don't have to charge the client a ton of money for a new board. If that doesn't work, then you either have a bad door controller. Sometimes you can replace the door controller and it'll still not be working. That's when you have to kind of start looking at the motherboard. It happens. I mean, sometimes the motherboard will even just stop liking an address. So if you have a board, a 2-door board, it's address 17, and then you're just having a ton of problems with that, you swap it out with the new one real quick, and they're still having the issue. Your motherboard's jacked up. You do a new download on it, still isn't fixing the problem. Sometimes, and especially if you don't have a motherboard to replace it with, then just find whatever the address is of the last board on the node, and then change the address from what it is to the last the number after. So let's just say there's 20 on there, so change it to address 21. And there's been times where that resolved the problem. I mean, in most cases, that's not enough to want to replace the motherboard. It's expensive, time and labor, trying to work with IT to get it online. Half the time if they have MAC filtering or whatever, or lockdown ports. So, just a couple of things that will save the client money, makes them happy with you, obviously, every time that you can get something working, and it doesn't cost them a ton of money. So just while we're still on readers, just a situation that a coworker of mine ran into the other day. He, said it was a bad lock. So what was happening was he was badging, and the lock was unlocking and then locking immediately. So 99% of the time, that's not a bad lock. If it's consistently at least even unlocking for a second, then the lock's good. So What a lot of people don't know when they run into that situation is most likely in programming, the door is set to lock on open. So as soon as that door contact opens up, magnet moves far enough away for that to open up, the door will lock. So if you're badging and it's unlocking and then locking right back up, immediately change course. It's not the reader. It's not the lock. There's either a problem with the door contact wire, or very rarely, but sometimes happens, the input on the access control. So yeah, make sure that the door's closing all the way. Make sure that there's still a magnet in there. Over half the time when I see this issue, it's because they didn't like the door, or they wanted to upgrade it, or they just needed to change the door, but they didn't call us, even though it's a card reader door. So they put in a new door, and then all of a sudden they have this issue because now there's no magnet in the door. So immediately, don't try to troubleshoot the door contact. Make sure there's a magnet in it. Then after that, pull the door contact out, cut it. It's only 2 wires. You can resplice it, and take a magnet, put both leads on your meter, put it up to the door contact, and just see if the circuit's closing. So yeah. So next basic thing that we can get called out for is they're getting forces. So just like I talked about earlier, the Rex is the device that tells the system when someone's leaving, it's not a forced door. I know nobody's badging, but this is okay. So immediately, if they're getting forces, go look at the Rex. If it's a motion Rex, then what you'll want to do is get your ladder, pop the cover off the Rex, leave the Rex on, and put your leads on the data portion. Typically these are wired normally open, and put it on where your 2 wires are landed, and see if when it's flashing, the Rex is changing states. So you should be getting beep, no beep, beep, no beep. If you're not getting that, boom, Rex is bad, replace the Rex. If you don't have one, have your shop order one, whatever. If it is working, then you'll need to obviously do the exact same thing at the panel. Make sure that when that thing is getting tripped, you're seeing it at the panel. If you're not, then you have some sort of wiring issue again. If you are, the input, probably went bad. Go back to what I said earlier. Either do a panel download or just even reset that one door controller, see if that works. If not, unfortunately, you're going to have to replace the board, or you're probably just going to have to replace the board. But if the Rex is in the handle, same thing, or if it's a electrified crash bar, so much easier than working with handles. The crash bar, just take the cap off, slide that little cover out, and put your leads on the Rex wires, push that door crash bar in, and if you're getting the actual beeps or continuity on that, follow the exact same instructions as before. If not, it's probably not just the whole crash bar that needs to get replaced. There's usually a module in there that some door company can just pull out and replace. If it's a handle, you're probably not going to want to take the handle out. So start with the hinge side of the transfer hinge, take the 4 screws off, cut the Rex wire, strip it out, put your leads on it, and then put that handle down. Same exact as everything else. If you're getting door helds, now that's not the Rex. Immediately go look at the door contact. Same thing, make sure the magnet's in before you start pulling things apart. And then, again, just follow the same exact steps as earlier. Make sure that the door contact is getting continuity, and then, move on from there. And the last part, the lock isn't working. Welcome to the Thunderdome. These are typically the hardest calls, but also, in my opinion, the most fun. This is, the client's like, really into their system. They know how everything works. They're getting access granted. Everything else is working, but the door's not unlocking. So for this, I typically just start right at the panel. Go straight to the panel and see what kind of system they have. Do they have a bunch of IDEC relays to the right side of it with actual physical fuses in them? That's my favorite, because every once in a while you'll get that lucky break, open that little fuse and meter continuity. Usually you can just tell that it's been blown. You replace it, good to go. A lot of guys will try to just replace it and then not ask any questions, or some people will get way too in depth trying to figure out why that fuse blew. But that's where you have to be, you need to communicate with your client. Hey, is this the first time that we've been out for this door? Yes. Well, then it's probably just an old fuse, or it probably just had a small power spike, burnt the fuse. Don't waste a bunch of time. Don't charge your client a bunch of money. Just move on. Now, you replace it, lock starts working again, and then you go over there and you're like, hey, is this the first time this has ever happened? And they're like, no, this is like the second or third time we've had to call you guys in the last month. Then you're going to want to check for either a short or typically a short. Most of the time that'll be either in the transfer hinge or the actual locking hardware. But every once in a while it can be cable. But again, a lot of the time, if it is cable, it'll be at one of the locations. It's very rarely just like in the middle of the run. So, go take the transfer hinge off, check out the cabling where our cable meets that hinge and then goes into the door. If, it looks a little rough, unplug power, cut it, strip it back, just splice the new fresh cable to the transfer hinge, and usually that'll be good. But if you are not so lucky and it's not just a blown fuse, you really need to try everything. So have somebody badge the door while you're at the panel, meter that panel. I can't stress enough, you should have your meter out like 70% of most of these calls. So put it on the lock output, make sure that relay on the board is changing states. If it is, good. If it's not really a reset you can do for that one. I mean, you can, and it might work for a little bit, but typically that's not a long-term fix. If it is working, perfect. Yeah, and if you don't have anyone for this next part, that's totally fine. Just take the lock wire. If it's on normally open, move it to normally closed. If it's on normally closed, move it to normally open. This will, fake unlock the door, not through the system. But what it'll do for you is it'll start sending power or stop sending power, and you can actually see if the relay that's holding the power is doing its job. Half the time, one of those is going to be the issue, but if not, then again, go back to the things I was saying before. Right there, go to the door, Usually the transfer hinge goes out way more than the locking hardware. So just go to the hinge where our wire comes in, take out the 4 screws, make sure that you're getting power right there. If you are, perfect. Tape it back up, put your 4 screws back in, and check the door side. Very often, you will all of a sudden not have power. Boom, new transfer hinge. Order one or replace it. If it's still good through the transfer hinge, most of the time, that's not usually our company's scope. We don't do the electrified handsets. So, I mean, that's it for me. If you guys do the handsets yourself, then obviously I don't need to explain to you what to do. You're already doing it. It's either going to be a problem with the lock or the wiring harness that goes to the door. Probably the lock, because the harness, it's just sitting in there. It's not getting, used every day like the hinge, in and out. There's not a lot of movement. Hypothetically, it shouldn't ever move at all. So, but if the lock at this point, is a mag lock, I am very thankful. Usually they have like 1 screw or 2 screws, take it out and you can see right there the actual processor or the board that the maglock is using. Put your meter on it. Is it getting 24 volts? Is it not getting any voltage? Usually it's getting 24 volts, but you can just open up the door. You're done. Maglock is bad. Replace the maglock. Strikes, basically the exact same thing. Love when the door's a strike instead of an electrified crash bar or handle where you have to start taking apart the hinge and all that good stuff. Just take out the 2 screws. Some very rarely 4, if ever. Take out those 2 screws. If it's a plug, awesome. Unplug it very carefully. You're gonna meter both sides. And if you're getting your 12 or 24 volts, whatever your system is, then perfect. Again, you're done if you don't have a lock to replace it. Maybe Facilities has a lock to replace it. That's becoming more and more common nowadays. If not, have your service team order a new one. If you are getting power, or if you're not getting power, then you missed a step back at the panel. Go back to the panel and figure out where the disconnect was. Or if you're absolutely positive that power was leaving that head end, then you have bad wiring, and pull out as much of the wire as you can. See if there's any obvious damage. If there isn't, a very easy way to confirm that the cabling is bad is go back to the head end, unplug the power, or just unscrew the terminals, pull the cable completely out. This will save you a trip, and just twist the red and black wire together, or whatever color you guys are using for power. I don't know what cable you're using. Sometimes it's white and black, but twist that together. Go back to the door again. Do ohms or continuity. Are you getting a really high resistance? Bad cable. Are you getting an open? Obviously, very, very bad cable. But, if you're getting low ohms, then again, probably missed something back at the head end. Again, it happens. Sometimes labels are bad, or, whatever the case is. Go back to the head end, and you have those 2 wires twisted together. Untwist them. Make sure that something changes. So if you have like really high ohms, or even just like low ohms, that'll tell you once it goes open, okay, for sure I'm on the right cable. I missed something. And that sums up basic troubleshooting steps for typical access control problems as far as doors goes. Hopefully if you're not an access control guy listening to this and you have an on-call schedule like our company does, where 1 week will be an access control guy, but the next week might be a fire guy, like last week and this week with me and Tyler. And then, the week after that, it might be a security guy. So really the point of this is just like, if you're just getting into access control, I mean, that's very simple, easy steps that might save you a lot of time. But I think more than anything, the reason I wanted to do this was if you're not an access control guy and you have to do an on-call call, hopefully some of this information was able to help you out at least a little bit, if you weren't sure exactly how to go about it. So, so moving on, since it's obvious that we have a bit of time, I'm going to go into a couple other things that, again, just typical, not crazy access control nightmares that you can run into on just a regular everyday call. And again, like I said earlier, hopefully sometime soon I'll actually have a nice access control setup here at the studio that I can actually just do short videos of basically everything that I've explained here, so that it makes more sense and a lot easier to track down if you find yourself in one of the situations that I discussed. So, but anyways, yeah. So, just going to go right into remote door unlocks. There's definitely different setups, and even kind of technically not, but under this category, emergency exit pull stations. They look like, fire alarm pull stations, but they'll be yellow or blue. And usually you'll only see this in a case where it's a read in, read out door and it's blocking the path of egress, or really, I think the standards kind of moved to any maglock door needs to have a physical break in it. So the power will actually go through that first and then go to the maglock, so that in an emergency, you don't have to worry about, a panel not working, or, having to worry about programming. I mean, you pull that thing, completely opens the circuit, and you can go through no matter what the emergency is. I actually just worked on one today. Door was completely unlocked, and these facilities guys, they're pretty good. We've been working with them and me personally for probably 5 years now, so they have a pretty good grasp on it. So I didn't have to do much troubleshooting. They basically were like, hey, we think something's wrong with the emergency pull station. So I showed up, and sure enough, the maglock completely unlocked. Everything else looked like it was working. Power was getting there. Flipped the pull station a couple times, and was eventually actually able to get the door to lock momentarily. Pulled the pull station again, unlocked, and then never locked after that. I mean, that's cut and dry. Just pull it open, take a picture of the part number, serial number, all that good stuff. Just having a new one ordered. It's pretty rare for shops to have those parts just in stock, especially with all the things that we have to work on. But remote door unlocks. So whether it's a receptionist, a nurse's desk, whatever, there's two ways to do it. Typically that'll never be a physical break in the power, just because it doesn't make any sense. But you can either do it through programming, so it'll go back to a auxiliary input, so an input on the panel that through programming you can make whatever you want as long as it's an input. And basically you'll program a trigger on that input. So when whether it's normally closed or normally open, typically those will be actually it really doesn't matter, but usually normally open, because if that button fails, you'd rather it just not work and the door works fine than for it to be normally closed, button stops working, and then that door is just unlocked all the time. So that's one way to do it. It really just all depends on if the client wants to actually have like a log of every single time somebody hits that button to unlock the door. If they don't care at all, the other way that you can do it, that a lot of people will do, is if it's a unlock on Rex door. So just typically mag locks only. Very rarely will you do unlock on Rex for any other kind of door, just because, well, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. You're basically having your lock be initiated twice as much as it usually would, so you're burning out the lock twice as fast for no reason at all. So this is luckily not very complicated, as long as you know where the input comes in and where the output is. Usually pretty easy to find the output, if you know where the door is on whatever panel. A lot of the time that auxiliary input will just be programmed into the board that it's on. If they are just using a lot, or some clients just like to have like 24/4 boards, 24 inputs, 4 outputs, and just have all their auxiliary inputs on that board just to kind of make the system cleaner if they have the money. I've seen it a ton of times, but so again, if you have somebody at that desk or something, they feel comfortable giving you their phone number or the desk number, makes it pretty easy. Or if not, just be like, hey, in like 1 minute, push this button and then let go. Wait 5 seconds, push the button again, let go, and go meter it. Are you getting the close? Okay, cool. Button's good, wiring's good. There's either something wrong where the programming got changed, someone accidentally deleted it, and it's not firing that output. If you're not getting that, 9 times out of 10, it's just that, well, not really cheap button, but cheap considering all the other equipment that we work on, probably went out. Very easy, just disconnect it from your cable, put your meter on the leads, push the button, see if you're getting changes of state. Or sometimes you won't even get, like on bad buttons, they won't just go out completely, and they'll like kind of like barely change state, but you won't get a full open. The resistance will just shoot down a lot. If everything's working properly, then there's something wrong with the access control panel. Again, that input's bad. Have them label it in programming, or if you're doing the programming, label it bad port. Just move it to another auxiliary input and make sure you change programming so like that input now will fire this this lock output. If you're at the panel and you're getting all of the push buttons, everything's looking good, you just have to listen. Is that relay firing? Can you hear it firing? It should be the exact same one that the card reader's using. So at that point you accidentally fixed it, which happens every once in a while. If they're a big client and they have plenty of money to replace a $50 part, probably just order that part so that you can replace it. If you have it on you, just replace it, because if it's already showing signs that it's not working, then eventually it's going to fail, and it's going to cost them way less money to pay for a $50 part that you can replace in less than 5 minutes than it's going to cost them for you to go back out there, another trip charge, whatever your time is, to replace something that was inevitably going to fail regardless. Very similar to this, my next one is remote or dual readers not working. Those are kind of separate ideas, but a remote reader is going to be the exact same thing as a push button, but they don't want just anybody to be able to just push that button and unlock the door. So this will be at obviously more secure facilities where the receptionist will actually have to badge it to let people in. But it's the exact same thing as now troubleshooting a door. Are they getting the reads? Yes or no? And then follow the output. Is the output firing? Is it working properly? Is it programmed properly? Typically with this sort of situation, it's going to be the reader or the output isn't working. Pretty easy if you know this. It's the same as a button. But dual readers not working. So by dual readers, I guess in this sense is you get a call after hours or during normal business hours, and there's like multiple readers aren't working, whether it's 2 or more. If they have more than 2 readers not working, they either had a huge power spike, power went out, generator kicked in, blew a bunch of equipment because they don't have it, GFCI'd or some type of circuit breaker, or they just had an entire panel go out. If the readers are powered off, then your panel either went out or, like I said before, a fuse blew. Do not say that the panel is bad until you know for a fact that you have metered and the panel's getting power and no lights are on. But that's pretty rare. Usually it'll be like 2 readers are offline. It's a 2-door controller. They either have Linnell or AMAG 2DC or S2, all 2-door boards. Exact same thing. Just make sure it's getting power. If it's not, then it's not the board. If it is getting power, there's something either wrong with the board or it burnt the reader somehow. Electricity works in strange ways. I've seen power surges where it hit an entire system that had 12 or even like 16 boards, and it only hit one board and didn't even fry the board, just fried the readers. I don't think there's ever been a situation where I've seen a board fry 2 readers and then they fry the readers again. It's usually pretty safe for you to put 2 new readers, but just make sure that the power input or power output on the board is fine. And if it is, just replace the readers. If the board's out, replace the board. Pretty straightforward there. So switching gears again, the absolute worst access control calls is my door is intermittently working. I hate it. Every single time I show up, they're like, it's working perfectly. It wasn't earlier. It's been on and off for 2 weeks. We finally decided to call you guys. Can you do anything? And unfortunately, sometimes it's no. But don't just leave or be like, not really, unless you just aren't super comfortable with access control. it might be better to just call it off, save them some money. But most of the time when a door's just, intermittently working, you can do a few things that will usually fix the problem and just never have to come back out. A couple of them are just things that I've said before. If they have like IDEC relays, they don't have like one of the new like Ultronics systems or life safety cans where they're resettable fuses and the relays are actual power supply boards. If they have IDECs, just replace the relay. I mean, it doesn't cost anything, and if that's the problem, then you just saved yourself a trip out and you saved them from having to call you back out. So another thing that I will typically do, you've already gone out there, you're already there, power down that panel, do a full download, power it down, plug it back in, it'll do its download. It usually takes like a few minutes. The system with most access control panels will continue to work under facility code, or in other words, if their badge is already programmed into the system, it'll continue to work. It won't log anything that happens, door forces, or who's going in and out of everything, but it'll still work. The chances of someone breaking in those 3 minutes is pretty low. So almost always they'll let you do it, unless it's just a really busy facility or they have like AMAG or something where the doors won't work at all while you're doing it. But I've done that a lot during intermittent issues, and I will say it works like half the time between just replacing that relay that takes 2 seconds or just doing a new download on the panel. Another thing that you can do if you have access or they have access to look at the logs, when it's intermittently working, are they getting a valid card read and just nothing's happening, or are they getting out wrong door? That'll automatically just right off the bat tell you kind of what the issue that they're having, and you can narrow it down so that if you do have to come back out, like you can't figure it out that day, the first place to go look. If everything looks good in the system, every read's coming through, access granted, but the door's not locking or unlocking, then typically if it's a transfer hinge and electrified crash bar, or transfer hinge and electrified handle, it's going to be that hinge or the lock. If it's a mag lock or a door strike, it could be the door strike. Sometimes that's what the issue is. But if it's a mag lock and it's intermittently working, right then and there that your problem's actually going to be on the access control panel. So, yep, just a few things that'll save you some time in the future. And ADA buttons are very complicated depending on what kind of system they have. So I'm not going to get too deep into this, but if you guys have, some sort of, module where you guys are controlling the door, it's a card reader. So the system actually, before it gets to the door, goes to a, CX33 or something, some Camden module or whatever your company uses. That is a whole nother thing that I will get into another day. But if for a fact it's not that module, then there's a few things that are just slight programming changes that could help a lot. If it's, the door is sticking, or it's not staying unlocked long enough, then easy program changes. One thing that I ran into the other day, which was pretty funky. So it was a vestibule. So if you don't know what that is they have a front door, and then you won't walk into the front door, and then there's like another set of doors. That's a vestibule, and a lot of main entrances to buildings will have those. So they had 3 ADA buttons, one outside with the reader, one on the inside of it that also controlled both doors, and then one completely on the inside of the vestibule that controlled both doors. So press any of the 2 inside ones, both doors open. As long as you badge read on the outside, hit the button, both doors should open. So it was really weird. If you badged and hit the front door one, the inside door would open, but the outside one wouldn't. Go inside, hit the vestibule one, so the one inside the vestibule, and both doors would open, but the the front door, which was an electrified crash bar, would go. Once it was like open, it would like it would lock, then unlock, then lock, then unlock, and then the doors would close, and then go all the way through the vestibule to the inside of the building. Hit that one, the inside door would open, but not the outside door. So just knowing that if you hit the inside one, it's probably not a issue with your module unless the module's timing is off. What I found right there, which was pretty simple, I was like, there's probably an unlock on Rex on this door, so it's messing with the lock while it's opening. Sure enough, the programming was unlock on Rex. That's what was giving it that weird lock unlock. Got that fixed. The fact that hitting the outside button wouldn't work, that front door wouldn't ADA open, I was like, there's probably a problem with the actual latch. It probably doesn't have enough, space to unlock and then open. Super quick adjustment on that. Boom. That door started working every single time. And luckily for me, those were actually the only 2 problems. All 3 doors started working properly after that. But, if you're badging, hitting the button, and the door's trying to open, but it can't, and it's not like some sort of like latch or small adjustment, if they're a rod type of door, so instead of an actual thing being sucked in from the crash bar and their internal rods and the latches up top, a lot of the time that's the issue. It probably doesn't have enough room to clear it, and you can just make a slight adjustment. If you don't know how to do that, YouTube it. It's faster than me explaining it. But if that is also not the case, obviously you don't want to burn out that motor, so don't keep doing it. And every time you're testing it, open the door so that you don't burn out that motor. But it could just be a timing on your module. Sometimes even just adding a split second to how long the door stays unlocked, or what you really should do is just do the hold time, or however long the operator waits, or the module waits to tell the operator to open, and that'll fix that. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up basic access control troubleshooting and tips. Thanks for listening to the Half Watt Podcast. We always want to hear from you, and we encourage you to email us at halfwattpod@gmail.com with questions or even your own stories. Funny, crazy, or praiseworthy, we want to hear it all. You can follow us on Instagram at halfwattpod to stay up to date on our feed. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And share us with a friend, the best way to help us grow. The Half Watt Podcast is a production of Now Hear This Studios.